Kevin Charoensri is a Thai-American composer with a multifaceted career in pop production in LA, recording arts, jazz piano, educational outreach, and arts advocacy, recently appearing on national television. He's held residencies and had performances from the top collegiate and professional ensembles across the US and abroad, including the Sydney Opera House and Carnegie Hall. He's currently pursuing his master's in composition at Michigan State University. Now, it surprised me meeting Kevin in his home studio and getting to know him as a fellow colleague is his drive and conviction behind his music and community. And he's well-spoken and inspiring to be around, and I hope that you can learn a lot from Kevin in this conversation. And for all the young composers out there, here's some advice that Kevin wished that he had when he started out.
So abstractly, I think young composers generally struggle with finding their voice and who they are. I still struggle with that. But that doesn't mean that you're not allowed to put notes on a page or write. So what does that mean technically? That means don't delete anything. Have multiple Sibelius files or whatever notation software you use. Never delete a thing, only file. So you write an idea, you think it sounds like crap, don't delete it. Put it to like measure 100, add a ton of bars and throw it to measure 100. Because you'd never know. More times than not, I've actually pulled that material back. So always file, never delete. I think another thing too is you don't need an expensive camera, microphone, or anything to have a good social media presence, right? I think I've watched a few of your old videos, while they're great videos, you filmed it on your phone, you didn't have a microphone, and that doesn't take away from the information you're saying. I think a lot of people are scared to be vocal about what they're doing because they're scared that they're not like the perfect influencer. We're not influencers, we're composers, right? We don't need the perfect lighting, camera, whatever. Just show the world what you're doing. That also brings me to my next point. Especially with us underrepresented composers and younger composers, we're fighting two battles already. You need to boast in a humble way, but like boast proudly about what you're doing. The joke that a lot of my friends and I had in undergrad was I have a 480p Instagram. Like my Instagram's upgraded now. Maybe it's like 720p now. But it used to literally be the crappiest photo of me on a residency. It was just my iPad and the ensemble, and it would just say like, at Texas Tech today, working on this piece. And while there's a billion things I could call out, and you could probably call out that I could have done better social media, that's still 90% better. No, it's 100% better than not posting anything and really doing all that other special stuff, editing and good caption and, posting at the right time and stuff. That really only helps about another 10 to 20%, Sure, it'll give you a boost, but like just posting already is enough. And I think also too, something a lot of young composers struggle with is finding the right coaching. There are people who are great composers and terrible teachers. There are people who are great mentors, but maybe not the best teachers. There are also people who might not have the best music to your ears, but they are great teachers. And you can run any permutation of those three factors. And generally for me, it's really about the mentorship and the teaching. And I think in that order, the mentorship has to be there. And then from there, usually the teaching skills follow. And even if they don't, they're still a good mentor, and you can always find someone to kind of get the teaching up. I think in football, they always say, you go to college not for the NIL money. You don't go for, the name. You don't go for any of that. You go for the coaching. And those are the guys that make the NFL, for example. And I've always kind of taken that to heart. Yeah, and this was actually very similar to my story. I didn't know composition lessons were a thing. I think the first thing is find the next best thing, quote unquote. I hate calling band directors the next best thing, but like ask your band director saying like, hey, I'm interested in composition lessons. You've been a mentor to me. Can you point me in the right direction? And like my band director was not a composer whatsoever, but he mentored me. And he, taught me Sibelius and pushed me in the right direction. And then one day he was like, all right, we need to find someone for you. Let's go ask around. And you'll be surprised where you might find the connections. It was actually in my high school counselor who knew nothing about music, whose daughter had a friend who took composition lessons. And that's how I got in touch for the first time. That being said too, now we're in an age where, don't be afraid to reach out to people. Like, you have Instagram, you have like direct message, like, message people and just ask like, hey, do you teach? That's how I have all my like high school students right now. They just said, hey, do you teach? And I go, yeah, let's do it. So sometimes it's a lot easier than you would think. No, I mean, I get writer's block a lot. I mean, today in my lesson, I was like, shoot, I don't know what to do. Like, I'm stuck here. I would say that like writer's block will happen to everybody. The why doesn't magically cure that. But I will say it makes it a lot easier to get over the block sometimes, because it's suddenly not really about you. Like, so the piece that I had writer's block on today, it's going to be premiered in Thailand in December. This is, what day is it? September 17th. So not a lot of time to turn it around. But I keep thinking about the community outreach we're going to do in Thailand. I keep thinking about the people in Thailand who don't know composition or music in general is a career out there. I think about that. I think about the people who only knew music as a way to be better than their neighbor. I think about all of that and I say, you know what? Kevin, get over your stupid writer's block. But at the same time, it's perfectly valid to have writer's block as a composer. And, I feel for all of us who have it, you and me both. I'm sure we've both been there. Yeah.
Now take a listen to Kevin's musical upbringing and how he got introduced to composition.
I was born in the States and quickly taken back to Thailand, where we spent about 6 to 9 months of the year up until I was about 6 years old when I started kindergarten in the States. So I like to say I mostly grew up in Thailand. And then I started piano in the States and Thailand around when I was 4. And that was tough because I think a lot of Asian parents, they put their kids into piano because their neighbor's doing it. If you ever ask like traditional like Asian families, especially in Asia, why does your kid play this instrument or do this tutoring? They can't give you a better answer than because my neighbor's doing it. And I love my parents very much, but it was the reason why they put me into it. And so from the start, I was always compared to other kids. I mean, like from day one, it was just this race to be better than the other kid. And I hated it. I sight read all the time. The last thing I wanted to do was touch the piano. And it wasn't until I was 12 in 6th grade, and they said, oh, join band and play, clarinet. And I was like, I don't want to, but all right, sure, I want to play piano. But they're like, no, not an option. So I started playing that, and I realized that piano, like music can exist with lots of people. And like for me at that time, that was a foreign concept to me. The idea of making music with other people was just unknown. It was always against other people. And so I started to realize with my piano skills, I could more or less fill out a band. And so I started with Sibelius, and I still use that. I got Sibelius as my 6th grade Christmas present, the perpetual license. That is still the same license I use, by the way. But yeah, so I started writing then. Started with arrangements, and then slowly got better and better. And it was in 9th grade, I had been doing this for about 3 or 4 years. This huge opportunity came along. It said, basically, we can take you and your band to the Sydney Opera House if you can prove that you guys are special enough. And so my director was like, hey, like, get up there. And I was conducting by this point too. So he was like, get up there, conduct your composition, and let's see if this tour takes us. Sure enough, they took us. So when I was 15, I got to conduct my own piece in the Sydney Opera House and premiere it. And that was a huge, it was a close to sold out crowd. I think it was like 2,500 people. Got a lot of news in Southern California and stuff. And yeah, that was the day I chose to go into music. I remember turning around audience, 2,400 people. I don't know where my parents are, and I could find them in actually about 3 seconds. I looked at my mom and my dad, and we just both nodded to each other, and I thought, great, I can go into music now as a career. And then my mom said, you can minor in it. After all of that. But eventually, that was when they started supporting me, and so yeah, that's how I got into this.
Now, Kevin is constantly on the road doing residencies across the country, and here's how that started out for him at age 19, and his response to composers who think that's out of reach.
Sure. Well, first of all, it's not out of reach. And second of all, it all started with my piece Rising Light, and it was a piece that was in response to post-COVID Asian hate. It was about my mom being scared to walk to the grocery store. And I think for me, that was about expressing myself and my unique self, but my ununique experiences, if that makes sense, right? Like, we're all unique, but we don't go through unique things. And so converting that to wind band, that was one, academically, I guess, somewhat intriguing. The mesh between American influences such as jazz and authentic Thai music influences. So not just going, oh, this is a pentatonic scale, it's Asian. No. Like, this is, this is inspired by real Thai music. It might not be the textbook for Thai music, but it's inspired by it. And so I think that led, plus the social impact, led into what for me was a chance to be able to share my story in an educational medium. And so when I go into a residency, I'm not thinking, oh shoot, like, what can I like teach everyone, or like, oh, how can I show everyone that I'm a better, like, superior musician? It's really not about that. And most of the time I really don't believe that I am. Like, if someone asks me for advice, sure, that comes from a place of, okay, I have a little more experience than you, especially someone younger. But especially in my early days, so my first residency was at I think it's called East Texas A&M now, but it's Texas A&M Commerce. I was 19. I had no place to be there. But I said, despite not having a place to be here, what's one way I can really connect with everybody? And so they really dropped me in, like, first thing. Like, they said, you're going to do an undergrad symposium. No warning. I was like, shoot. So I had to pull a presentation just out of thin air. Luckily, I had one from my undergrad where we had to do, like, comp seminars and present to fellow students. So luckily, I was saved by that. But then he said, you have to do a grad seminar. And I'm like, I'm 19. I am a sophomore in second semester. What the heck am I going to tell these 30-year-old band directors getting their masters? I'm like, and doctorates, I think. Like, shoot, like, what am I going to do? And I was, like, panicking. And I was just thought, okay, you know what? This is just a hang. This is just a conversation. And miraculously, they asked about, like, what was Thailand like? What was, your background there? What were some of your influences? And playing those recordings for them, they were like, shoot, I actually learned something. And I was in disbelief. I was like, I'm 19. There's no way I just taught a 30-year-old something. But I think I kind of did. And they taught me stuff too, such as, like, what are band directors looking for in music? And so I think really residency is like, sure, yes, you need to come prepared. You need to be ready to, I guess, educate. Don't go in unprepared. But for me, it was just about connecting with people. And if that's your number one priority, I think you can't really go wrong.
I also asked him whether these residencies come out of the blue or if he usually has some sort of mutual connection to the ensemble in some way.
It's a mix of both. That one was simply out of the blue, and that doesn't really happen too often. The next one was a month later, my sophomore year, still 19. It was Texas Tech, and that was also out of the blue. But it was through Ryan Kelly, who premiered the piece. He was suggesting this piece to his colleagues as well. But that first one, it was absolutely out of the blue. But that being said, for me, what I really cared about with residencies was giving back to where I came from. So, like, Southern California was a big one where I always, I wanted to return home to see my parents, but more importantly, I wanted to return home to give back to that community that gave me so much. And so, like, I'll get a decent amount of offers from the network I've built now. But, like, I rarely turn down a Southern California one because it's a chance for me to basically go back and, like, give thanks. And maybe, all of those kids kind of grew up the same way I did. A lot of them are Asian, a lot of them, like, it's expensive out there. And, like, I didn't grow up in, like, the most crazy, economic situation ever. And, coming from Thailand, there were times where things were tight when I was younger, and I can relate with that, So it's a bit of both. I feel like once you get the ball rolling and the fire starts, it does go.
I'm always discovering how to relate my music to my identity and heritage, and Kevin had some profound insights about that.
I think, to my parents' credit, they always kept me in touch with the culture, so I never really lost touch despite being in the United States. Now, when it comes to music, I would say that my mom singing and, like, humming lullabies throughout the house and just songs that she likes was the best thing ever, for my musical development. Because there was always, while I was obsessed with, I don't know, EDM and, like, pop music and 808s as a teenager and, producing for, and getting the next, stream placement and playlist placement on Spotify, it was always still in my ear, even though when I was, as a teenager, spotlight chasing a little bit. It was always still in my ear. And so when it comes to, I guess, like my collegiate career now, in the past 4 years, for me, it's meant telling the story of Asian Americans in the sense of Asian and American in one. So, a lot of us, English is our primary language now. And sometimes, it's happened to me, we'll go back to our home country and we get called white. And it's like, I'm not white, but okay. And I guess explaining that like feeling of homelessness, if that makes sense. And then when it comes to a technical term, deep diving again with like my mom's melodies, but also like a lot of recordings. Like I'm a jazz pianist too, so they always say listen, 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 and it's not like listen to the iReal Pro track, the backing track. No. You listen to the real recordings, and you figure out, and you take selfishly from them. You steal from them because that's how you keep the music alive. For me, I have selfishly stolen from a lot of these Thai melodies that my mom sings, and I more or less, utilized her as Shazam and been like, hey, what song is that? And listened to a billion recordings of that and figure out what are the inflections? What are the, why did they articulate it that way? Or like, how do I speak my own language? Like Thai has so many vowels and letters and so like nuanced. Okay, so then how do I bring that into music? Because I listen to traditional Thai music and I can hear the difference between a staccato and an accent or a marcato and an accent. And it means two different words. But in English, sometimes maybe it doesn't. So for me, it was saying, okay, I have all that information. How do I transcribe all of that? Selfishly, because it's a beautiful culture, it's beautiful music, and I want to share that with the world. So for me, I think like just staying authentic to it, but then also realizing that, frankly, I'm not the authentic Thai person that I was when I was 6. I've grown up in America, and that's okay. My experience in itself as an Asian American is unique, but the experiences weren't. So sharing that, I think, has been the number one thing keeping those two things together. Yeah, I think all of my music is deeply personal to me, and it's unapologetically who I am. And it celebrates even Rising Light that stems from a very dark place. It's an unapologetic celebration of culture. And I think that unapologetic celebration of culture at this point is deeply political no matter what. Because there are times where I want to express who I am. And, one of my pieces, such as An American Songkran, that's a straight up just very celebratory piece. It's always used to open or end a concert. It's never been a middle piece, other than opening like the second half, for example. But even that is kind of a political message at this point, because it's saying I can be Asian, I can be American, I can bounce between those countries, and I'm proud of who I am. And I think just being able to celebrate your, like, who you are, your identity, that's being silenced right now. And so just proudly doing that, I think, is political enough. Not everyone, to answer your question bluntly, not every one of my pieces is about a political movement or reason, because I think I would burn out like tomorrow, especially with everything going on. But celebrating who you are at this point, whether we like it or not, has been some sort of political, it has some meanings on politics at this point.
This year, a high-profile performance with the Marine Band was canceled by an executive order. Here's how that initial setback led to a nationwide arts advocacy campaign.
I had met Darren Lin, the assistant director of President's Own, at like 2 Midwests ago. We got along well. He was like, send me your music. And I'm like, I didn't know who he was. I was like, oh, sure, why not? And like, I was just joking around with him as a person. And he friend requests me on Facebook, and I'm like, assistant director of the President's Own U.S. Marine. Holy crap, okay. And so I was like, I shied away from sending Rising Light for a while, like 3 months. And then one day I was at an airport, actually to my first residency. I was like, screw it, why not? Sent him. He's like, thanks. 2 years pass. Then I get a messenger message, September of 2024, I think around this time last year. It says, hey, we programmed your piece with Equity Arc. And it'll be the top high school musicians who are people of color paired with the Marine Band. And it's going to be for our May concert in 2025. And like, when I tell you, I was like panic attack in the best way possible. I was like, man, this is so great. Like, I watch videos of President's Own since I was in 6th grade in bands and playing clarinet. Best ensemble ever. I was like, it's a dream come true. So, everything is on schedule, and I was actually supposed to go up there and work with both the students and the Marine Band. We're getting everything settled, and then February of 2025 comes around, and we get the news about the Kennedy Center. And I'm like, I'm next, aren't I? Like, I gotta be next. Like, there's no way. Like, this piece is so political, just in its, like, creation, that, like, there's no way this is gonna happen. And I was like, but I should keep my head up and stuff. And around this time, too, there were all those anti-DEI executive orders. And so sure enough, February, I think, like, 13th, I want to say, don't quote me on that, but I get a call that's basically, like, from Darren, basically saying, so it can't happen. And I understand it's not his fault and everything, but that was basically the call. And sure enough, the Equity Arc fellows were notified, and in the email it said it was because of an executive order banning the military with anything to do with DEI. So after that, a few days later, like not even a few days, 2 days later, Washington Post calls me. And I'm like, there is no way. They send me an email first. And I'm in a practice room at UT, eating my lunch. And I see it's got to be a scam. This is funny. I mean, I thought it was real because I had done a Facebook post the 2 days before. And it went like incredibly viral. It was like 200, 300,000 views and like a good amount of likes and like a lot of comments. Like people reached out that day. I should say that first. It was a great community that backed me that day when I announced that news. And then that Monday, that was a Sunday, that Monday, the next day, Washington Post sends me an email. I just called a number just because like, I gotta see if it's legit or not. And sure enough, he says, this is the Washington Post. And I'm like, holy crap, there's no way. And he's like, do you mind if I ask you a few questions? And I'm like shoving down my lunch and I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm like, I'm probably on the record. So I asked him like, am I on the record? He's like, yeah, like if you don't mind, like this might be an article. So I'm like, oh, sure. This is like a Monday. I'm like, oh, I have to miss composition studio class. I guess Washington Post is a good reason to. Yeah. So I do the interview. And then Michael Brodier, hopefully I didn't mispronounce his name. Great questions, great thing, great questions to just kind of talk about the experience of me as an underrepresented composer, but also I was the youngest composer on that program by quite a lot. And I actually have much more of a closer age gap with the high school students who were going to participate than many of the other composers on that program. And so for me, it was about speaking for the high school students who couldn't really speak for themselves at that time. Spoiler alert, they ended up going on 60 Minutes and doing the performance there, and they got to speak. So I'm very glad that they got that chance. So that happened, and then 2 or 3 days later, after the Washington Post article drops, it dropped the next morning after my interview, which was crazy. 2 to 3 days later after that, CNN sends me an email, and I'm like, this has got to be fake. And they're like, we'd like to do an interview with you and Carlos Simon side by side. And I'm like, there's no way this is real. So I'm at my apartment gym, and I like copy and paste the number into the phone, and I'm like, is this really CNN? And they're like, yes. And I'm like, if it's really CNN, send me an email right now. And it's like CNN. I'm like, that is legit CNN. And she's like, basically like the producer was like, hey, I need Be Real of You conducting, I need like this, and last thing, do you want a script? And I go, no, I want to do it off the cuff. I want zero script. If that means I stutter, that means I stutter. And you watch that interview, second question, my internet cut out and I didn't hear the end of that question, and I was stuttering for sure. But I said, I'd rather do that and be authentic to myself than do some script. I owe it to everyone. So yeah, that was basically the entire situation. From a young age, I wanted to give back, as I mentioned, but I also just didn't really want to step on any toes. I was a very shy kid, and throughout my undergrad, despite writing a very political piece, I was very much kind of like, okay, I kind of had this is more or less from my LA producer days, but there was like a rule, you don't post about politics. So I thought, okay, like my music will stand for itself. People will know where I stand politically just from that. And then at some point with the Marine Band, I obviously had to break that rule because getting canceled by the US president is inherently a very political act, and you have to respond to it, right? You can't just sit there, right? And so from then on, since I was like, well, I already broke the rule, might as well break it to hell, you know? So I really started to get political in the sense of like standing up for people who were being silenced, because it wasn't just me, it started off with those high school students, and I had done a lot of high school outreach and community outreach and advocacy when I was doing residency. So if I did a college residency, I would usually reach out to a few high schools and I say, I don't care about your budget. If I can help in any way, I'll even like give you my piece for free, and I'll do a workshop for free. I would love to just come meet your students and that kind of thing. And I would always pick in LA where the Asian pockets were, because I knew those were the kids who needed a role model, because I knew I needed a role model in band when I was a kid. So then post Marine Band, I've worked, I'm one of the composers in residence with the San Gabriel Symphony. And this symphony was formed off of the funds that were left over from the Monterey Park shooting, which was an Asian hate crime in, I believe, 2023. Don't quote me on that. But after the funerals were paid for, the rest of the money went to formed Arts Bridge the Gap. And so they're going to do Rising Light in January, actually. But for me, joining more or less that team of people and that kind of, and that composer team, but also that artistic team, it really taught me that like it's not the time to be silent. And so I'm very vocal about how I feel about things going on in the news. I will admit there have been times I've been straight up abrasive, because there are frankly things that are going on right now that are just not just deeply concerning, they're deeply problematic. And so more or less with that symphony and with that team, I've been able to go into a lot of high schools and a lot of colleges, more like state colleges in Southern California, and simply just kind of speak my mind and say like, look, we're all in this together. All of us underrepresented artists and composers, we're all in this together. We're all allies for each other. I might take the Asian American space, but that doesn't mean I can't, partner with like African Americans in our like, struggle together, but also more importantly, our fight together. And so I emphasize it's a lot about the fight and like being able to be heard as underrepresented composers, because, that's been a struggle since, the beginning of America and the beginning of time. We made some progress, and I think, frankly, we're going backwards right now, and if we don't fight, we're not going forward.
And I found it to be a very inspiring message and story, and how our small composing world can actually reach the highest levels of national discourse. Switching gears, I wanted to get Kevin's take on hard work versus luck.
I mean, as you said, you have to be dedicated and you work for it. I think when your purpose and why match the technical knowledge, and when luck and hard work, that kind of like trifecta / like quadfecta, if that's a word, all hit, that's when breaks happen. For me personally, I had always been in the mindset of whatever it takes for me to get to a level where I can give back to the communities that I came from, so Southern California and Thailand, whatever I can do to get there, I'm gonna do. And so that was my why, because from a young age, I mean, I dealt with a lot of health problems. I know we've joked about this. I'm allergic to like over half the foods in Thailand, But, I was always like, not in a dark way, but just like kind of like somewhat close to death. And I was kind of like, okay, like, what's my purpose here? Like clearly, like, okay, if I can hear all these voices in the band, like that's great technical knowledge. I can use Sibelius as a 7th grader. That's great technical knowledge. But like, what's my why here? And so my why for a very long time, and it still is, and I've just talked about this on the guest lectures that you were referring to, the technical knowledge means absolutely nothing if you don't have a good why and motivation behind it. So I think like people who are like just searching and searching and searching for their big break, and I know we've talked about this, but I have a background in pop music production too, and this goes for pop music too. People who search for the break don't usually get it. You need a lot of like dedication to the why, and people usually only know how to dedicate to the technical. Like people know how to practice for an hour a day. People know how to, get up in the morning, drink coffee and practice. I don't want to say that's not hard, because it can be hard sometimes, but also being dedicated to like going back and like figuring out why did you get into this in the first place, and connecting with that on a daily basis, I think is important. So when I wrote Rising Light, it was all 4 of those, I think, combined. I had pop music knowledge, so I knew how to mix and master my recordings. So when you know, it was the competition slash like call for scores at UT, my recording I think stood out because it was quite well done and quite well mocked up. But more importantly, it was pulling from my unique experience, yet ununique experience in growing up in Thailand and combining that with jazz music, which takes technical knowledge. You need to know your theory to not make your extensions clash with stuff, right? But that also took just artistic vision and frankly going back to my culture to pull off. And so I think to sum that all up, you know, technical knowledge is very important, but it's absolutely useless if you don't have your why and like, you know, the emotion and drive behind wanting to, you know, bring your why to life.
I asked Kevin about his future plans and where he sees himself in the next few years.
Yeah, I chase the want to give back to my communities first. I think I owe a lot to Thailand, and against my will, but you know, it did happen. I moved here, and not that I ever forgot about it, but I had to kind of move on from it and, you know, learn the language really quickly. Thai used to be my first language, and now English is my primary language, and that's fine. But I want to go back there, and I want to be able to give back to that community. I think for me, in a 10-year plan, it would look like 2 to 3, maybe more, I don't know. But 2, 3, max 5 years in Thailand, I would love to teach out there. I would love to find a way to give back and reconnect with my family. I mean, we've always been connected. I go back close to every year, but I mean, like, live with them like when I was as a kid. And then after that, I think, you know, more or less, America is my home because I've grown up for the most of my life here now, and I'd like to come back, maybe do the doctorate, you know, get to the next level in order to be able to keep giving back. And then from there, you know, that puts me at about, you know, 7 to 8 years out. And I think those last 2 years would, for me, be find what needs me most. And I wish I could give you an answer, but we'll see what that is. But whatever that is, whether that's, you know, going back into pop music production, maybe that's teaching at the university level for, you know, orchestration and composition. Maybe that's teaching electronic music at the university. Maybe that's just joining the LA industry and writing for film. You know, I've done all of these in the past, but whatever needs me most, you know.
It was a pleasure to be able to sit down with Kevin for this powerful conversation. I'll link his information down below so you can learn more about his work. And if you like these deep dives with composers and conversations, then let me know down below. Otherwise, thanks for watching, and keep writing.